Bon dia a tots. Primer comentar que, com veieu aquí a la pantalla, hem fet un hashtag del quart Congrés Català d'Infermeria i Salut Mental. Si esteu interessats en donar-vos la vostra opinió, voleu fer algun comentari rellevant, algun comentari sobre la conferència o sobre les coses com estan anant, ens interessaria i ens agraeix que esteu implicats en aquesta iniciativa. És el coixinet al quart Congrés Català d'Infermeria i Salut Mental, que ja vam començar ahir. Si reviseu una mica enrere veureu que es pot seguir la conferència inaugural amb streaming en YouTube i després veureu que hi ha algunes coses més vinculades a les reds a la xarxa. Bé, primer que tot ara dono la benvinguda al COLUM, farem COLUM BRACKEN, farem una conferència sobre el model comunitari a Irlanda. Primer de tot donar les gràcies a l'organització de Vic i a l'organització del Congrés per pensar en mi a l'hora de fer la conferència inaugural. Em va fer molta gràcia perquè jo havia estudiat aquí a la Universitat de Vic i fer de moderador la conferència inaugural ha estat un plaer i un honor. La conferència d'avui versa sobre el canvi. Estava parlant amb el COLUM que les persones que em coneixeu sabeu que soc una persona superordenada i la presentació no me l'havia preparat perquè sempre que hem anat amb alguna presentació, ho comentava amb ell, m'agrada veure que les persones que van a presentar els moderadors els conferenciants els coneixen i m'ha agradat acabar-la de preparar un cop he passat unes hores amb el COLUM per saber l'impacte que faria a venir-nos a explicar la seva experiència tan important com han tingut a Irlanda. Hem acabat de concretar alguns temes avui al dematí mentre estàvem esmorzant amb els punts de vista tan diferents que tenen i m'agradaria fer referència, ja que parlarem de canvi, a la definició de la RAE sobre canvi, que és l'acció i l'efecte de canviar. I canviar significa deixar les coses en situació per agafar unes altres. Després de passar les hores que he passat parlant amb ell, me n'he donat compte que el canvi en salut mental també és important i és una cosa bastant factible. Volia fer referència quan parlem del canvi que fa 8 anys, si us en recordeu, quan Obama va intentar guanyar les eleccions als Estats Units, tothom va començar a parlar de canvi, a les campanyes polítiques es van centrar en el canvi. Crec que és una de les poques persones que realment ha intentat fer canvis i que els canvis venen generats per actituds, per implicacions, i al ser el primer president de color que va ficar-se amb l'Obamacare i el programa de Salut i que al final de la seva legislatura s'ha ficat en temes de tanta controvèrsia com són els matrimonis homosexuals, és una persona que realment està implicada en el canvi. Tindrà les seves coses bones i les seves dolentes, però almenys algunes coses les ha intentat canviar. Parlant del canvi, quan faig referència al canvi o en parlem amb les persones que tenim ingressades a les nostres unitats de salut mental, parlem dels canvis i m'agrada citar Einstein quan diu que la bogeria és fer sempre el mateix esperant resultats diferents. I jo crec que amb el model comunitari d'Irlanda ens poden demostrar que fent les coses diferents s'aconsegueixen resultats molt interessants i molt importants, sobretot pels infermers especialistes de salut mental. Quan ens plantegem el canvi també ens hem de plantejar si seguim igual, si seguirem igual i què volem i què aprendrem amb aquestes coses. I penso que s'ha de fer sobretot un anàlisi de realment cap a on ens dirigim. El COLUM m'ha estat explicant les línies estratègiques que van estar fent mentre van estar preparant aquest canvi i va ser una cosa molt planificada amb uns objectius molt clars, pensant no només en la diferència de salaris que tenien allà, sinó sobretot en les capacitats que tenien els infermers de salut mental amb els seus rols professionals i científics i assistencials. Quan parlem de canvis, hem estat parlant amb ell, m'ha donat una bona lliçó de com els canvis venen per programes, per estructures i per experiències professionals, aprenent dels errors que es cometen, que són el principal font d'aprenentatge que tots tenim. Ens conflueixen i ens dirigeixen cap a una planificació estratègica que ens ha de fer i ens ha d'orientar cap a aquest sentit. Sobretot, ara us citaré una mica el currículum impressionant que té el COLUM, però sobretot amb el que em quedo també és que no s'ha oblidat mai del que ell diu que és el bedtime, que és el temps que passen els infermers de salut mental al cantó dels pacients i que llavors crec que ens dona un punt de vista molt interessant i sobretot de les bases de lo que és l'enfermeria de veritat, tot i que es dedica a gestionar i planificar estratègicament les línies a les quals s'ha de dirigir la comunitat d'infermers de salut mental, perquè està basat també en la millora contínua. Us cito una mica el seu currículum perquè ens posem una mica en situació de com va començar i en quina situació es troba en la comunitat científica i infermera d'Irlanda. Ella és Royal Psychiatric Nurse i Royal General Nurse, és bachelor en els estudis d'enfermeria i Master of Science. Va començar la seva formació com a Registered Psychiatric Nurse abans de complementar els seus estudis generals d'infermer. Després us explicarà una mica com estan programades la formació dels infermers i com poden arribar a tenir la titulació d'infermers especialistes en salut mental. Quan va tornar a treballar als serveis de salut mental va treballar en diferents àmbits d'actuació com són els usuaris adults, l'orientació infantojuvenil i fins i tot forense, obtenint experiència treballant inicialment com a staff nurse i posteriorment en una varietat de rols de gestió d'infermeria clínica. Mentre treballava entre continents, perquè també va estar treballant a Austràlia, el COLUM va estar treballant amb l'especialitat clínica d'infermeria a la comunitat, abans de treballar en un equip d'intervenció a la crisi. Posteriorment, el COLUM va ser designat director d'enfermeria i en la unitat de planificació i desenvolupament midwifery, que és com les nostres comadrones d'aquí, en l'antiga junta del Northeastern Health, quan va ser establerta el 2001. Aquesta unitat va ser responsable de dirigir i establir el desenvolupament de serveis, inclús la millora de serveis i el desenvolupament d'iniciatives professionals. En els últims anys, el COLUM ha estat director d'enfermeria dels serveis de salut mental a la zona Southwest de Dublín, abans de la seva designació el 2012 com directora d'àrea d'infermeria als serveis de salut mental a la zona South Central de Dublín. Va ser designat com a director de programa en octubre del 2015 per l'Oficina de Gestió de Programes de la Divisió Nacional de Salut Mental, que ha estat establerta per desenvolupar un programa de reforma pel canvi en els serveis de salut mental. El COLUM ha estat orientat al desenvolupament professional en programes d'enfermeria infantojuvenils i infermeria forense, ha sigut membre del Consell Nacional pel Desenvolupament Professional de l'Enfermeria i de les comadrones del Midwifery a Irlanda i ha sigut membre de múltiples grups operatius de millora tant professionals com de serveis. Dono pas al COLUM i moltes gràcies per la teva assistència amb nosaltres.
Thank you, Miguel. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? It's okay? People up the back? I'm taking it that you can hear me okay. I suppose, first of all, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the Congress for inviting me here to attend and present today. I would hope that I would give the people here some overview of what's happening in the Irish mental health services. We have been involved in a lot of change and there's a lot of reform and change taking place and will continue to take place. I suppose it's very encouraging to hear about your university education program, and I congratulate all the graduates who achieved their academic qualifications this week. I've also had an opportunity to look outside at the presentation boards, and even though I can't speak Catalonian, I can read a little bit and I can see a lot of good work, a lot of programs that are underway, perinatal, bipolar, children and adolescents, which is very similar. So again, congratulations to all of the people who contributed to the event. I'd also like to just compliment the organising committee, and a special thanks to Miguel, who has been a fantastic host and has explained a lot about what's happening in Catalonia, and in particular what's happening in the mental health services. So I suppose the areas that that's better. Okay. The areas that I want to cover is just understanding the broad environment that is happening in Ireland with regard to health services. And I know that a lot of people here are probably from clinical practice, but it does have a big impact, and we're seeing it more and more, that sometimes when you're working as a nurse in a clinical area, be it on a ward or out in the community, you forget that the macro environment, and the macro environment has a huge determination on what happens in clinical practice, because it all relates back to, say, budget and availability. And in times when there are financial challenges, often the frontline services are the services that are cut. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about that, a little bit about what's happening in the mental health services, and specifically a little bit around nursing practice, and some of the changes that have taken place in Ireland in relation to the nursing practices. Okay, I didn't make an assumption. I know a lot of people know about Ireland. A lot of people have said to me, even in the last day, I hear about Ireland. I've never been there. I'd love to go to it. We are an island on the western part of Europe. It's quite unique. We have, I'll tell you a little bit about our population, but we have a huge Irish diaspora. A lot of people who have Irish heritage, Irish descendants who are living throughout the world, and that comes from our history. We have been a country that has traditionally emigrated. Large populations in North America, in Canada, in Australia, and particularly in the UK. We would have 100 million people who claim Irish descendancy. But according to the official statistics, we would have 3 million people that are not living in Ireland who can claim Irish passports because their descendants are sons and daughters of descendants of Ireland. So Ireland, that's where we are. I asked our team, what do you think of Catalonia? And there's a lot of similarities. In Ireland, we are very proud of our culture. We have a lot of artists and writers, poets. So people thought of Salvador Dali, they think of Gaudi, they think of Costa Brava, beautiful beaches, good food, and they also think of Barcelona Football Club. So that's what a lot of Irish people, I asked my team, what do you think of in Catalonia? But so that's just a flavour of what we perceive Catalonia to be. Ireland, I've just done a brief comparison. We would have a population of 6.5 million people on the island of Ireland. There's 4.5 million that live in the Republic of Ireland, and about 1.8 million that live in Northern Ireland. Our health services are...
El volumen de les traduccions que si baixeu una mica els pinganillos, que està una miqueta alt.
Too fast?
No, the volume of the translators, they are very, very high. For the machines that translate in Spanish,
okay.
Were very high.
So do I slow down?
No, just you don't mind.
Okay. I thought I was talking too loud. The land size of Ireland is 84,000 square kilometres, so it's about twice the size of Catalonia. We have one large city in Dublin, where most of the population of Ireland are living. What we have found, I'm not sure if it compares with this region in Catalonia, but a lot of people from the west of Ireland and the rural areas have moved towards the city, and that has created a lot of pressure on our existing health services in the greater Dublin area. In terms of our economy, we would produce about 180 billion each year. I just compared it with Catalonia, and it's 200 billion. So that is just a comparison. So size-wise, we would probably have similar type population. You have it concentrated in half the area, big city Barcelona, big city Dublin, and most of our population, younger population, are moving towards the cities. Also, the other thing that when I was just looking at the background information before coming here, the first people that came to Ireland came from this region. So I suppose that particularly here in Galicia, there's a lot of Celtic heritage, and I just thought that it was interesting that maybe there's more similarities than we thought. In Ireland, we had an extremely vibrant economy. It was named colloquially as the Celtic Tiger. And the Celtic Tiger, we were producing about 12% year on year, the biggest economic growth in any place in Europe. And everyone thought we had loads of money. The reason it's important is this was being lauded as the greatest achievement, but it was built very much on building and infrastructure. The Celtic Tiger, in the mid-80s, or in the mid-noughties, we had a lot of economic problems, and as people here know, we had an economic bailout. But this was the obituary to the Celtic Tiger. He visited our country. He came with riches in 1996, and he left us with rags in 2008. So the reason that this is important is because our policy in relation to mental health was developed in 2006 when Celtic Tiger was still with us. So today, I'm not sure if this compares with Catalonia, but in 2006, we only had 20% of our debt in terms of money. Now we have 93% of what we produce is paid back in debt. So it has had, like you can see these crucial years, we have had a high amount of economic debt, and that has impacted on the range of health services that we've been able to provide. I suppose in the context, the World Health Organization would say that 20% of disability is attributed to mental health. In Ireland, we would spend approximately 6% of our annual health budget on mental health. It's about 700 million each year. But if you were to attribute it, it should be to 20%, it should be 3 times that. And the economic cost, there was an Irish study undertaken there in 2008, and it said that the cost of poor health was 3 billion. So there's a disconnect between the amount that we would spend on mental health as compared to the actual costs. I mentioned there we've been very fortunate in that we have a policy document that was endorsed by our government. So this is government policy. It was contributed to by all health professionals, service users and families. So it was a total strategic document, and it was developed in 2006, and that has mapped the pathway for the development of mental health services. However, there has been criticisms from many quarters that a lot of the recommendations in the document were not implemented. However, there's been multiple factors with regard to that, but all of the health services, all the mental health services presently are working towards that document. It's been implemented by and large with a firm commitment to all of the objectives in the document. I suppose in terms of what is the critical issue, the vision is to support the population. So it's wider than just mental health. It's to support the whole population achieve their optimal mental health and improve the quality and standards of service. It's also, our mission is to promote and protect the mental health of the population by providing safe and effective mental health services. But Okay, but you can see here the effective and efficient use of allocated resources and capabilities. So that's one of the key considerations. Where we had come from in Ireland, we had a very large inpatient population back in the 1950s. In the 1960s, approximately 50 years ago, we began to move slowly out of the traditional hospitals. There was a policy document in 1994 which gave the impetus to move to the community to establish day hospitals and day services. And you can see that our population of inpatients reduced from, say, 21,000 down now to about 3,000, 3,500. So that's that's the direction that we're coming from. These would have been typical of the traditional psychiatric hospitals, Victorian buildings built back in the 1800s, and this particular one only closed 5 years ago. So that actual building, that hospital, would have had maybe 1,500 people residing in it up until maybe 20 years ago, and it has been steadily reduced. We have moved in all our inpatient units, the equivalent of your acute units, are now in general hospitals by and large. There's still some of them that are standalone, but they're all in general hospitals. So this is a very quick profile of what's actually in the mental health services. I have mentioned there our policy document, the reorientation. We would have 9,000 staff working directly employed in the mental health services, and that is 9,000 of all disciplines. Medical staff, health and social care professionals, and nursing staff. Nurses make up the largest component, and during the downturn in our economy, it was nursing posts that we lost by and large. We would have had about 5,500 nurses. We operate over 850 sites. These approved centres, they are our inpatient units. We currently have 18 plus 1 extended management teams. The 18 are regional teams. The plus 1 is a national forensic service, so it provides a forensic service for the whole country. We are governed by the Mental Health Act that was brought in 2001, and from what I understand, it is not dissimilar to your own Mental Health Act, involuntary admissions, protection of rights for people, mental health tribunals, and so forth. We are inspected by our regulator, which is the Mental Health Commission, and we have a dedicated inspectorate of mental health services. So we can be inspected anytime, day or night, announced visits or unannounced visits. In the last 5 years, we are the only element of health that has had investment. So we've had 35 million. Our government have seen that it's been a priority. So each year we've had 35 million for new developments, and that was completely at variance with everything else that was happening in the Irish health services. So mental health services have been fortunate. This then is just a kind of a very quick schematic diagram of what is actually in our health services. We would have over 1 million, I don't know if you can see that, 1 million community contacts and 20,000 inpatient admissions a year. The trend has been, we would still have the same number of admissions, but our admissions are generally very, very short. The community contacts can be outpatient visits, they can be day hospital, they can be home care contacts, assertive outreach contacts. We would presently have around 1,000 acute beds. Our policy says that we should have 700, and we are finding out now that that is over-ambitious, because while it is fine for acute presentations, we have a population that have severe and enduring mental illness who need much more dedicated rehabilitation inpatient services over a slower time, that may need admission for maybe 1 or 2 years. So that is an emerging need. We have 60 child and adolescent beds for the whole country. So a child in Ireland is anyone up until the age of 18. So there's a lot of pressure in that area. We have 120 general adult teams, and I will give you a profile of what a team is. We would have 60 child and adolescent teams. Some of the specialities that are now emerging, psychiatry of later life, again, we have an increasing aging population, and this is probably one of the areas that is really growing, and we've got some really good people working in psychiatry of later life. We have day hospitals. And again, very effective as part of the overall menu of services for people attending the community. We also have, I'm not sure if you have them here in Catalonia, but we would have high support community residences. And a high support residence is a service that is staffed by nursing staff during the day and at night time. So it can be used as a step-down facility for people who move out of the acute wards. We have also got medium and low support, and the reason that those hostels and community residents came into being was that when we moved out of the traditional hospital, we needed different services. But anyone in these should be living with the local councils and housing agencies. So we are actually moving out of that area. We are transferring all of those residences so that people can get proper tenancies with local authorities. We have 93 national forensic beds, and we have emerging specialist community teams like rehabilitation teams, and I mentioned psychiatry of later life, eating disorder teams, and so forth. Again, this is just a very kind of a quick profile of what kind of teams we have. You can see them there: psychiatry of later life, rehabilitation, forensic, mental health and intellectual disability. This, according to our policy document, Vision for Change, this would be a profile of a team that you would expect to see for a population of 50,000 people. I suppose the thing to be mindful of, it's made up of a whole range of healthcare professionals, and again, no single profession would have the monopoly. We're finding that teamwork is really, really critical. Miguel has explained to me that there's a move here that health professionals are starting to be educated together in certain courses, and that's one way that we're going to that we have committed to try and drive team working. The consultant is the clinical lead, and that is conferred through our legislation, that the consultant is the person who's ultimately clinically responsible. And that is something that we're always mindful of. Team coordinator, NCHD is a junior doctor. This would be our nursing staff, 2 senior nurses, 6 staff nurses, occupational therapists, cognitive behaviour therapy. Now often these roles are being undertaken by nursing staff who have undertaken additional training in cognitive behaviour therapy or in family therapy. So that is a brief outline of what a team would be. The orientation of our services, and I have compared it. I know that you have a policy document, and you have 3 levels. You have primary, you have the equivalent of secondary care, and specialist care. Our hospitals and our community teams are in this domain. And this is, where we're treating people with high mental health complex needs, and we're using a large reliance on professional expertise. We are presently reorientating our service to get out here, that to support people in the general practice, people attending their GPs. We are doing a lot of work with local communities, local voluntary groups, to try and develop local networks that people don't have to rely on the mental health services and self-management. So our resources are concentrated in here, but our service direction presently is trying to build up all the supports in the outer domains, and that's where the orientation of our policy is, that people want recovery, and recovery is out here. They don't want to be in here in inpatient units or in dedicated mental health services for any longer than they need to be. So what we're trying to do is develop capacity out here. In 2013, we've been very fortunate. We have one health service, and a national mental health division was established. So we have a national director, a number of national leads, and that has helped focus all our different regional authorities working in the same direction. The membership of that national directorate, our current national director is an occupational therapist by background, and we have a really good team of extremely committed people. I just wanted to give you a sense of the slide. We have planning and performance, so everything is on outcomes, outcome measures, what is our investment, what were we getting back in return. We have a head of quality and patient safety, because adverse incidents, I'm sure you have them, every mental health service, but we monitor the adverse incidents and try and identify trends and take corrective actions. We have a head of service user engagement, and again, that's a commitment at the very national level that a service user is part of our national management team in order that we can drive change throughout our services. So every area team has to have a service user, and every local health team has to have a service user. We have service improvement and operations, and we have a clinical advisor, and a lot of our clinical programs are being developed through here. And then we have a director for the National Office of Suicide Prevention, because again, we would have had a lot of high profile concerns about suicide and suicidality. So I've mentioned there about the service user participation. It is taking, like at a policy level, it's taking two levels. First of all, we're trying to build capacity because we want to go beyond tokenism, and it's to get service users actively involved in shaping how we design services. The criticisms, and I've sat in groups and I've been challenged personally, that we sometimes design services that we think that the patient needs or the service user needs. So we have addressed that in a number of ways, and then we want to put the structures in place at local and at national levels, that there's service user involvement at every level throughout our mental health service. We have a commitment to an advancing recovery initiative, and again, I suppose we're really trying to focus and reorientate all of our staff about, you know, looking beyond the actual illness and the symptoms, that we are trying to maximise the person reaching their potential. Now that raises a lot of challenges for us, because certainly I can speak for myself. I trained as a psychiatric nurse. I trained in a model that was very oriented towards medical pathology. It was about symptoms, it was about presentations and so forth. So the biopsychosocial model is very much a holistic approach where you're looking at the full person. And I think that nursing probably lends itself very much to that. Some people think that it's either or, and that has been a debate. You either have a medical model or a recovery model. I've got some really good friends, and some of my best colleagues are consultants, and we would often talk about this. And I firmly believe, my view is that there's a place for both. When somebody is acutely ill and acutely distressed, they do need the interventions of medication, they do need a psychiatrist and so forth. But after, when somebody is in their period of recovery, that's where other health and social care professionals and nursing staff can come into their own. I've mentioned there the clinical responsibility of the consultant psychiatrist. In legislation, they are the person who's clinically accountable. And I have mentioned there's some really very, very committed and brave consultants who would delegate the authority to other members of the team, to nursing staff, to health and social care professionals. So it's not a case that the consultant has to take all of the responsibility. However, if there's an adverse incident, it goes back to the consultant, and it's one of the challenges that we face. So collegiality is really important, and I suppose having evidence-based decisions, that if you as a nurse make a decision about discharging a patient, or allowing a patient out for an afternoon out of a ward and something adverse happens, if you have a proper decision-making basis and a rationale for it, that's what we're finding is really important. The other thing is, in recovery, one of the challenges that we have faced is that before we would have been quite paternalistic, so we wouldn't have assumed a position, we know what's best for the patient. And now we have to stand back, because sometimes I was doing a piece of work there a few weeks ago, and we were looking at homelessness. And I was told that there was a certain number of people who were homeless, who needed to be admitted into psychiatric care. But actually, when we went and checked it out, some of the people said, no, we don't need your service. So the only way we could compel somebody to attend would be under the Mental Health Act. Make them involuntary. And these people were not well enough, but they were still causing society a general unease. So you have to be able to accept if a person expresses their preference and they're not mentally ill, you have to be mindful of that. Positive risk taking. I don't know if it's an issue here. I'll talk a little bit about it later on. But positive risk taking, it's very easy if you've particularly had an adverse incident, if somebody has died or absconded or engaged in some risky behaviour, to become risk avoidant. I am not going to make that decision again. I have learned, and you become very insular. And I think that one of the challenges we have is trying to negotiate risk and the management of risk with individual patients and their families. Also, one of the, I suppose the last point, the multidisciplinary working. Again, you will see that like every health professional will bring something unique to the table. And the challenge, what we're finding, is trying to blend all of that together. So the service users exemplars, how we're doing it is we would have trialogue meetings, and very, very challenging, where there would be service users, there would be carers and staff all in the same room talking about maybe some aspect of mental health, and it could be something like involuntary admissions. So the thing that we have learnt is that you hear it from the eyes of another person. So we tend to only look at it from maybe a staff perspective, but you hear it from the service user perspective, and you hear it for the family member. I've also mentioned there about introduction of peer support workers, but co-production here is probably the key thing that is changing. We have a lot now of programs that are being developed by service users and by staff and delivered. So it's probably one of the unique changes. One example that I can give from my own practical experience in the service I worked in was that we had a challenge. The Mental Health Commission, our inspector, came to us and said nationally they were going to go and try and reduce the use of seclusion and the use of restraint in all of the wards across the country. And they asked us, would we have a look at it? So the most powerful intervention that changed the attitudes of staff was we used one of our service users who was on our management team at that time, and he came and he spoke to the staff about his experience of what it was like to be restrained, and it had the single biggest impact on changing the attitudes of staff. So I think that we moved that on for our undergraduate nurses. He now goes into Trinity College Dublin. He gives that same talk, and it is changing the whole culture. It changes the way people perceive things, because when you hear it, the feedback is very, very powerful when you hear it from a service user. I've also mentioned there a lot about we're challenged the whole time, our organisational culture, how we think about things. One of the single biggest differences, I mentioned the paradigm and of how we understand things to be. The clinical model of understanding is based on scientific research, randomised controlled trials, and I suppose the recovery model is based on the learning of the lived experience. So one is not superior to the other. As a health professional, and particularly as a mental health nurse, you have to be aware of both. So there's evidence in practice, and there's the evidence of the research, and the combination of both is the challenge certainly for health professionals in the Irish setting. And I think that we've moved a long way, but the more we explore, the more challenged we are. I've mentioned there as well also about genuine involvement of service users. Sometimes people have just brought in it as a tokenism. So the challenge is right from the very start that the service user is involved in the design of a service, they're involved in the delivery of it, they're involved in the evaluation and the feedback. And again, the involvement of peer support, community support's really, really important. Our clinical programs, and I know that you have a lot of specialist programs. These are a number of programs that we have developed over the last number of years. Self-harm in emergency departments, eating disorders, and I saw some of your posters outside about bulimia, about eating disorder. Our first episode psychosis program. We are currently developing a program on homelessness because there's a high correlation of people who are homeless who have severe mental health problems. Programs that we are planning to develop during this year are mental health, substance abuse and alcohol. In Ireland there was a separation that you either had a mental health problem or you had an addiction problem, and it was like oil and water. The two of them never met. So now we have recognised that we have to design our services around what's the emerging need. We're also developing a programme on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And one of our challenges is that we have to formulate a model for people with intellectual disability who are presenting to mental health services, because again, their needs are not being met in the current system. Just with regard to first episode psychosis, again, what we have designed is that it's a multidisciplinary team. Nurses are very much central to the delivery of the program. It is focused on the duration of undiagnosed psychosis. And what we have found, and I'm sure the literature is the same the world around, I'm sure from your own experience, the longer a person presents that with a psychotic behaviour that is untreated, the poorer the outcome. So what happens during that time is that they become socially withdrawn, they become isolated, lose contact with maybe their friends, with the other people that they may have gone to college with workers. So it's very much focused on early intervention. These are the four elements of it. There's a CBT, our staff are trained, CBT for psychosis, cognitive behaviour therapy for psychosis, family therapy, individual placement support. So this year in our service plan, we're putting in dedicated people who will work with the person who's presenting to do everything to keep them in either education or to find them actual employment, because at the end of the day, our service users are saying, they don't want a diagnosis of schizophrenia. They want to have to stay contacted with their friends, to stay socially connected, to have a job, and to have a roof over their head. So that's what our service users are telling us, and that's why we have a focus. Nursing staff are central to it. Like our team set this up 4 years ago, and it was a consultant psychiatrist and 3 nursing staff who initiated it. Now there's 10 people working on it, but again, it is through the leadership of the consultant, but also the leadership of the nursing staff. The self-harm in emergency departments, again, I'll just move on quickly. We would have around 11,000 presentations to emergency departments with self-harm each year. In 2013, 37 clinic nurse specialists were employed and assigned to work in those emergency departments. It's based on a comprehensive psychosocial assessment and assertive follow-up. What we found, this was the area, Dublin South Central, DSC. What we found was that 19% of the people who presented were admitted to the General Hospital for medical stabilisation if they had taken an overdose of medication. 10% were admitted to the psychiatric unit. 13%, and this was a real concern, left without being seen. And they're people that you would be very, very concerned about. 1% would not agree to admission, and 57% were not admitted. So these people here were diverted into drugs and alcohol services, into community mental health services. In the Dublin area where I work, we would have a lot of people coming from the regions, so some of them would have to be repatriated back down to their own local services. But the focus of the programme is very much on the assessment and ensuring that the connection with the people is made and that they are referred appropriately, because we have found that if you don't intervene, a presentation of self-harm is a predictor of actual suicide. So that's why we have assertively gone after that. I've mentioned economics, and I suppose really it's about the management of scarce resources. And decision makers, they're always looking at, you know, is it cost effective, et cetera, et cetera. So if that's the language of the, I suppose, the people who commission services, we have to understand that, but we also have to focus on our outcomes. These, again, I won't bore you with the breakdown, but you can see here, the cost of an acute bed in a general hospital is nearly €100,000, and that was in 2008. So if you look at medical inflation, that's probably closer to probably 130 or 140,000. But what was very interesting was a day hospital was 2/3 of the cost of a inpatient bed. And I suppose that challenges you to think, is it cheaper to do a day hospital? Because a day hospital, certainly the feedback from service users is that they like it, but it's not, there is a cost in it. The other thing that was very noticeable was an outpatient visit. It was costing almost €100. Again, I don't know if you're aware when you're in your clinical areas how much costs are, but we have become more and more aware about it. I would just say, while our policy says efficient use of resources, accountants will only look at the expenditure. And I think as health professionals, we have to look at the health and social care outcomes. And I suppose these are the discussions we're having. The allocation in mental health, it's not a choice between hospital or community. It's a combination of both. Critical evaluation of the models. You have to look at the quality rather than just looking at the actual expenditure. The other challenge that we have seen is that some of our models are outdated. I've mentioned that about some of the community residences. Skill mix and effective use of resources. Michael has told me about staffing ratios in different hospitals, but again, it's a constant issue in Ireland. Care in the community is not always cheaper. It has to be resourced properly. And I think that is really, really important. And we're all competing for scarce resources. Now, I was only looking at this last night, and I thought that the arrows should be going in both directions. The community mental health team is the unit of service delivery. That's the hub of where all the activity takes place. I suppose the most important ingredient in it is the staff that work in the team, and particularly the one-to-one relationship. I know Michael mentioned there about your value system, but it's the therapeutic relationship that people build up with the client. In order to, I suppose, treat people in their home, we would have home care teams that go in and assertively work in the home with people who are very depressed, psychotic, whatever. We also have the day hospital. If those two first ports don't work, then we will use the acute admission unit. But the profile we're seeing is that more and more acutely unwell people are ending up in our admission units. Most people are being managed in here, okay? So the arrows are going in that direction, but they should also, people come out of the acute admission unit, go into the day hospital and can be treated on home care. I suppose home care teams, they have been very much welcomed by staff and by patients as a new way of working. People find it very rewarding working on a clinical decision making and so on. But with the clinical decision making, you are out of your comfort zone. So you have to make decisions, and there can be a lot of responsibility, particularly if things don't go well. So it's one of the things that, while it's really welcomed by staff, it can be quite challenging. Sometimes it's actually very difficult difficult for families because there may not be a full range of community supports. So the burden that is placed on the family to look after an ill member of their family at home can sometimes be very, very onerous. And I suppose the key factor is that it has the potential to shorten admissions. This was just some of the things that make it work well, effective functioning, and what curtails functioning. If there's a very clear philosophy and clear aim about the service, what it does, what it's intending to do, clear operational supports, staff, experienced staff, well trained, having clinical supervision, clear pathways of referring people in and referring people out, and clarity on the role of the key worker on that therapeutic relationship. And again, the consultant, clear leadership from the consultant, that all contributes to very effective teams. What contributes to teams, I suppose, that maybe not working so well, if there's referrals, high rates of referral of people with emotional unstable personality disorder rather than severe and enduring mental illness. Sometimes it can break the care. If you have a relationship with a specific patient, a home care team can actually break it inadvertently. Staff burnout and pressure on families if there's not a range of supports. And confusion, this one is really important, confusion of the limits of clinical responsibility between medical and nursing. It's your job, it's my job, it's your job, it's my job. Who's responsible for what? So again, dialogue and team working really important. So again, we have focused very much, we have a specific training program for teams, particularly around the multidisciplinary element. As I said, everyone brings a different perspective. So what we have to do is to try and blend that. The potential for role blurring is quite considerable, and unless you have a well-developed team and you have a mechanism in which to tease that out, you will end up having problems. You have to recognize every discipline has their own unique value set and professional roles. Again, the clinical leadership, really, really important. And I'm talking about clinical leadership from anyone within the team, any different discipline. And team coordination, you know, that there's one person who coordinates the whole functioning of the team. The other thing that I mentioned there in our axis where we're trying to move to, primary care. Like we're in specialist mental health services, but primary care, lots of people, 25% of people attending general practice have mental health problems, of which 95% remain under the care of the GP. And that's really, really important. The bulk of the heavy work is out there, not in the mental health services, but out in the primary care services. Now there's probably a lot of training going on for general practitioners, and one of the things that we're being challenged to do, and we're working away at it, is finding easier pathways in and out of mental health services. What's happening in emerging models is that we would have seen some, I suppose, variations in, say, prescription of medications. People presenting to a GP for depression, and they would be on suboptimal doses of medication. So in one of our areas in Ireland, the mental health team meet with a collective of GPs every month and work through the clinical cases with them, guide them, consult with them, and so forth. And that's working very effectively. 5 minutes, okay. Okay, so I've mentioned there our emerging population needs. Again, it's probably not much different than here. Aging population, children, homelessness, prisoners, mental health and addictions, and so on. Stigma, we've had a very, I suppose, important anti-stigma campaign that has been underway for the last number of years. And it, you know, high-profile sports stars and artists are coming out saying the mental health problems. The rationale behind it is to try and get people who are facing mental health problems to come forward and seek treatment. That is the program. I'll leave it up on the slides. I'm just conscious of the time. I just wanted to go on to our nursing career pathways. We had a commission on nursing back in 1999, so 18 years ago. There are 3 clinical pathways. We would train specifically as psychiatric nurses. And again, that's one of the conflicts that we have. We have, with our nursing board, we have sought to change the title. It will change this year from psychiatric to mental health nurse. So you go in, you do a 4-year undergraduate program, you become a staff nurse. So you have 3 career pathways: clinical, managerial, or academic. This is the area that I will just mention. We have clinical nurse specialists and advanced nurse practitioners. The clinic nurse specialist is a person who's educated to level 8 or above, so they would have a higher diploma. They would have specific skills in a particular area, so they would have developed specific competencies in, say, suicide or cognitive behavior therapy or whatever. We also have the advanced nurse practitioner, and probably one of the grades that is really growing now in mental health. And I explained to Miguel yesterday that with the reduction of junior hospital doctors, consultants are coming to me in the role I was in, saying that they would prefer to have a senior nurse who's experienced, who will work with them continuously, rather than have a junior doctor who's only in training with them for 6 months and then changes after that. So they are autonomous, experienced practitioners, competent and accountable, and they are very experienced in they're educated to master's degree. I'll leave this slide, but anyhow, all nurses do care planning. Clinical nurse specialist has a specific focused knowledge base, and the advanced nurse practitioner has autonomous decision making. They can admit and they can discharge people. So what we have found in an Irish study in 2010, advanced nurse and clinic nurse specialist, it decreased waiting times, easier access to care. In my service, the people have led out on nurse-led clinics. So rather than a person with severe mental illness going to see a junior doctor, they are reviewed, their medication, etc., by the nurses, and compliance, etc., is hugely increased. But the interesting thing is that increased job satisfaction for the nurse, and there was no additional costs for putting those services in place. So that's very interesting. We have a specific policy on a guidance document on psychiatric nursing, and it just gives a formula where we're trying to reorientate our services. I've mentioned there positive risk taking. It's going beyond avoiding risk. It means identifying the potential risks and working with the service user and their family. Probably what has enabled us to move the practice paradigm and expand our practice has been our scope of professional practice. Again, it came out, there's 3 elements to it. First of all, is the nurse educated? So if you want to expand practice, if a nurse came to me tomorrow and said they wanted to take a new role, I would look, is there any specific training that they need to do? Is there any specific technical skills or competence that they need to do? And then have the authority. So you would train them, you would ensure that they have clinical supervision to ensure that they're proficient at the skill, and then you would redesign your hospital policies to support them undertake that role. This is the very last slide. I know the timekeepers are probably saying, will he ever finish? We have nurse prescribing, okay? In 2007, it was a long journey. We got legislation giving nurses the authority to prescribe. 1,200 nurses have been educated. There's a specific educational program, very, very challenging. Lots of chemistry and anatomy and physiology. We've had 151 nurses, psychiatric nurses, educated. And now there's 96 of these that are prescribing, and they're prescribing all the range of medications that you would be using, olanzapine, clozapine, etc. It is a collaborative arrangement with the consultant. So you can't prescribe all of the medication. So if you're working in severe and enduring mental illness and you have maybe 10 medications that you use, if the consultant is willing to support you, your policies are formulated that you are allowed to prescribe those medications. And what we have found is that medication compliance is hugely increased, okay? the therapeutic relationship. If you're able to go, rather than seeing a junior doctor for 10 minutes in an outpatient department, if as a nurse you go, you spend 1 hour with your client, medication compliance really improved. One of the challenges that we have is that there's no additional remuneration for taking on this role. So that is a challenge, and trying to negotiate your way through drugs and therapeutics ethics committees. But they have all, the reason it has been difficult in Ireland is because our mental health policy has been out in the community, or it's been pushing us out into the community. The drugs and therapeutics committees generally are in the hospitals. So we would have to go back into a hospital and make the application. But we would not have done it without the support of our consultant colleagues. I suppose that's probably the really important part. It's the collegiality. Okay, so what we're seeing, and I would throw it out here today, the challenges we have, leadership, and everyone thinks that the leader is the person who is who's in a managerial position. True leadership is in the front line. And that's where change takes place. And you're the people that have the ideas. Team working. Again, when you work in teams, it's more than just you are a nurse within a team. The issue of skill mix. Michael mentioned there, nursing, the science and the art. We have focused a lot in the last number of years on the science part, the education, etc. But the values and the skill sets that are really important is the interpersonal relationships with the patient. And I suppose it's something that sometimes our profession loses sight of, but that's what is valued by our service users and their families. A good nurse, good observation skills, good interpersonal skills, humane care and compassion. So the therapeutic and the evidence-based practice and the evidence-informed practice. So that's really an overview very quickly of what changes that have taken place. And I suppose that I know that you are facing a lot of challenges, and I'm saying that everyone here is a potential leader. The key to successful leadership today, what we have found out, is influence, not authority. So you have to keep that in perspective. It's how you influence your patients, it's how you influence your colleagues, it's how you influence the policymakers, it's how you influence what happens in your hospitals. Okay, thank you very much. How are we doing the time?
Really well.
Thank you.
Bueno, ens queda poc temps, ens quedarà temps només per una pregunta. Ens hem passat 10 minuts, però jo crec que la traca final que hi havia reservada pels rols d'enfermeria de pràctica avançada i la prescripció d'enfermeria, que és el que més ha generat. No, jo he vist les vostres cares, quan el Colum m'ho va explicar a mi, em vaig quedar amb la cara mateixa que heu posat vosaltres quan ha dit que l'enfermeria arribava a prescriure i manegava olanzapines i clozapines. Per això no l'he volgut tallar, perquè m'ha semblat un apunt molt interessant. Ens dona temps per una pregunta i ens n'anirem a esmorzar. Si algú vol, suposo que deveu tenir moltes preguntes, si algú vol preguntar. Us he deixat impactats perquè les xarxes socials estan cremant. Vull dir, la noia aquesta d'aquí davant. Sí, sí.
Disculpa, passa el micro.
Exposition. Thanks. My English is little.
Yes.
Ho diré en català. Tothom m'entén en català?
Yeah. Té traductor.
A mi m'agradaria saber, perquè jo soc mare d'una filla amb un trastorn, també soc sanitària, no infermera sinó auxiliar, m'agradaria saber, després de tot aquest procés de rehabilitació, a Irlanda, quina capacitat d'absorció hi ha dels pacients amb la societat. Si tenen alts nivells d'integració o la integració en el món laboral i en el món real, diguéssim, després dels ingressos o després d'aquests processos, és altament positiu, o encara hi ha moltes barreres perquè aquests tipus de pacients realment s'incorporin a la societat. A mi m'agradaria saber a Irlanda si hi ha un nivell bastant bo, perquè aquí la dificultat del nostre país és aquesta continuïtat després a la societat d'aquestes persones que pateixen això. La continuïtat moltes vegades es talla, es trenca i no existeix després el procés d'integració completa en la nostra societat. Moltes gràcies.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, and it's a very valid point. One of the things that we have realised is that people do not want to be patients of our service forever, and the challenge we have is to try and build the supports out in the community to integrate people. We have had a very high-profile campaign to reduce stigma. And a lot of people are coming forward, leaders in sport, in arts, coming and talking about their own personal stories. One of the things that we're trying to do is prevent somebody becoming dependent on the mental health services. So in order to do that, we have, for example, we are not running, say, day services exclusively for mental health other than day hospitals. So we go to the local community, and I'll give you an example. There was a fishing tragedy on the southwest coast of Ireland, and the mental health services went out to the fishing village and offered them, would they set up counselling, etc., and the people said no. And it changed the relationship with that community. So they only come in the mental health services only come in to support that community if requested. So the integration is within the community. So if I'm a community nurse there, and if I have your loved one, I will try and work to find out what's happening in the local community. If it is, if there's any social activities, if there's any employment, to try and get them fully integrated, not to take them out of their community. And we have an association in Ireland that is probably unique in the sense it's the Gaelic Football Association. It's throughout the country, and it's all run by volunteers. So it's a natural congregation point. It is much more than football. It's about socialisation, networking, and it has become, that organisation have taken on mental health as one of their challenges, and they're doing a huge amount of local work to cut down on all of these problems. But to go back to your point, we are putting in, say, the placement support people to keep people working and living in their local community, to keep the social contacts with their friends, to build up those networks, because a lot of what happens is through ignorance, and people, people wait for someone else to do it, to set up, say, some sort of group. But we're trying to keep people in their own local community, support them to get a job, support them to have their own accommodation, and only offer a service to keep them living in their local community. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, thank you.
Bueno, moltes gràcies.
Okay. Thanks to the translator.